In this video, we're going to look at the authorize and allow anonymous attributes that you can include in your controllers and actions. In our previous videos, we had gone into our web config and we had added the authentication element and the authorization element. Now, the authentication element sets up the type of authentication that we're going to use, which is forms authentication. The authorization element allows us to kind of do this blanket authorization setup where we're going to deny anonymous users, requiring everyone to log in, and then we're going to allow all users who are authenticated. While this works out well, we run into some issues. We lose the ability to set up granular authentication in authorization throughout the application. The specific instances, well, a user can't log in if they don't have an account. So the other option is that they need to go and create an account. But in order for them to get to the account creation page, currently our authorization says they have to be logged in. So we don't want to have a person logged in to go create an account. We want to allow anonymous access to that page or that action. So to do that, we're actually going to remove the authorization elements from the web config. And we're going to go ahead and actually jump into our controllers, and we're going to set up those attributes to allow for authorization or to allow anonymous access. Now we'll start off with the home controller, and what we'll do here is we're going to set an authorization or an authorize attribute at the top of our controller class. And this authorize attribute will basically say that anyone who is accessing this home controller must be authorized. Now with this authorize attribute, there are different overloads. We can open up parentheses inside of here and see that we can include things such as specific users, specific roles, and we can utilize that to help control who can and cannot access certain areas of our site. But for now, we're just going to put an authorized attribute at the controller level, and that'll say anyone accessing any action inside of the home controller must be authenticated. They must have a login, and therefore we're only authorizing authenticated users. Now, that's different from our account controller. Inside of our account controller, we have our create methods or actions, we have our login method or actions, we have a logout, and we have this login partial, as well as some privates, which those aren't really relevant when it comes to these attributes. So the create we can do a few different ways. We can say that anyone is allowed to access this account controller, and we do that by putting in allow anonymous attribute. That basically says that anyone, anonymous, unauthenticated, has access to this entire controller and all of the actions under it. If, for example, we want to only allow logged in users to access the logout, we can put an authorize attribute on the logout. Therefore, I can't call logout unless I'm logged in. So those are really the two most simple approaches to setting up your authorization and authentication. So if we run our application now, we'll see that we're redirected to the login page. If we try to go to the home page, we still get redirected back, but if we try to go to the create page to create an account, we actually gain access to the create page. So those attributes are now locking us out of certain parts of our application, but allowing us into other ones. So let's go ahead and let's do something a little more granular, where we're actually going to allow ourselves into a particular action, but lock ourselves out of the rest of the control. So from our account controller, I'm going to add a new action. I need to stop my debug. Add a new action called public action result, and I'll call it details. And we will take in, actually we won't take any parameters. Now this particular action you have to be authorized to call. And what I'm going to do here is I want to be able to present a view that just outputs the user details, the details of that user account, who is logged in. So the first thing I'll do is I'll just do a quick simple check and say if if request.is authenticated, and then we'll go through these steps. So I'll start by getting the username. So I'll say string username equals user.identity.name, and then I will reach for my user DB context, or I'm sorry, it's my module 8 DB context. So I'll create a new instance of my context, and then context users, and I'll do first or default. So I'll grab that first record that has the matching username, where equals username, and I'll store that in a user object, and I'll just call my variable user DTO. And then from here, I'm going to take my user DTO and I'm going to convert it into a user view model. So to do that, I'll say user view model, user VM equals new user view model, and I'll do my inline instantiation, and I'll just copy over my values. Alright, and then the last step will be to return a view passing my user view model. Alright, and then from here, to make things simple, and then I need to do, if they're not authenticated, I still need to return my view. And then I'll show you how to handle whether there's a view model being passed back or not. So I'm going to right click, say add view. I'll go ahead and choose one of these templates, and I'll just choose the details template, and I'll use my user view model, and we'll choose add. So this will scaffold up for me a basic page to list user details. Now the catch here is if we don't actually pass a user in, nothing will come up. So what I will do at the top here is I'm going to do if model equals null. I'm actually going to do a different view than what I would have done if I had my model. I'll say else, and then I will present this page. I'll actually keep that footer information at the bottom, and let's see here. We'll just exclude it for now, because we could use the back here, but we don't need the rest of it. I'm just going to copy this. Maybe I'll just bring it up here. That way we have our back list, our back to list call, but we don't have the edit because it won't work if there's no view model. Alright, so from here we'll just do a simple div, and I'll say no user information provided. Now technically, since we have to be authenticated to get here, we should never run into this issue. But there's always those random moments of time where maybe an application does get confused, or you have some bad logic somewhere, and quite honestly you could end up here. But considering all the parameters and requirements we've put in place, this case should never happen. But you could reuse this view in another action and just end up with different results. So we'll go ahead and go with that. I'm going to go ahead and add just a quick span here and just change the color to red. That way we get a nice noticeable change here. Okay, so we'll go ahead and save that. And now the last thing that we'll need to do is go back to our account controller, and we need to remove the allow anonymous off of the entire controller. And the reason for that is that if we have the controller set to allow anonymous, that takes priority over setting authorize on our specific actions. So by default, all controllers allow anonymous access, so there's no need to flag a controller as allow anonymous, but we can go through here and then specify that only certain methods require authorization. That is actually the inverse, though. If you want to, you can set authorization on the entire controller and then allow anonymous on specific actions. So there's kind of this interesting, you can do it one way but not the other, and kind of game at play here. But in our case, we want to allow anonymous access to our account controller, so we don't put any attributes there, and then we want to force authorization on specific elements for specific actions. The final thing I just want to note is that this child action only, we can put an authorize attribute on here, but if this ever gets called outside the context of authorization, it will actually cause your application to crash, or in some cases you get abnormal redirects to authorize or to log in. And that's because that partial action causes the authentication subsystem within the ASP.NET MVC to kick in, and it goes, well, I can't serve you up this partial because you have to be logged in, but maybe the parent action or parent view is allowing anonymous access. So you have to be kind of careful with your partials and marking them as authorized. It can be done, so I want to make you aware of that, but it's something to be cautious of, because when you start marking your partials, you can end up having effects further down the line. So we'll go ahead and save and run. And now we are here, so if we try to go to account details without being logged in, we still get redirected back to the login page. So I'll go ahead and I'll log in. Password, and we'll hit login here. And that should present us with our user account details. And there we go. So our username, password we did not pass in, first name, last name, email. So this view obviously needs some work, because we're not going to show password in the user details page. But that at least gets us to the point where we can present that data, and it requires us to be logged in. But we don't have to be logged in to access other pages such as login or the account creation page. So utilizing those authorize and allow anonymous attributes gives us better granular control over the authorization and authentication of our application than what we would see if we were just going straight forward and trying to build out our app using the elements that existed within the web config from the previous video.